Okay, like, maybe, but here's the really interesting thing. So the word for snake in Hebrew is Seraph. There's a class of angels called the Seraphim. The im suffix on the end of a word just means it's plural. So there's a whole class of angel called the snakes. So the snake in the garden is potentially a very clear allusion to an angelic figure. And while most Christians associate the serpent imagery in the Bible as being bad, there's actually a lot of really good serpent imagery in the Bible. Oh man. Am I going to have to do a 10-part TikTok on the serpent imagery in the Bible and how it relates to Jesus in a positive way and points to the bodily resurrection, which most people is what they're thinking of when they think of heaven? I'm supposed to get an appendectomy today, but I can probably reschedule that. Okay, snakes part 2. I mean, I guess I didn't really call the first one part 1 because it was just a reply to a comment, and doing this series was a joke. But here we go. So it's important to the understanding of the serpent imagery in the Bible to understand how snakes were perceived in the ancient Near East. And snakes were, in large part, viewed as having renewable characteristics because they shed their skin. They were a symbol of new life and that kind of thing, which is, I'm guessing, where if you read the Epic of Gilgamesh is trying to find like the immortal plant, and the snake comes and steals the plant from him right as he's about to take it. And so I'm guessing that's sort of to explain the mythos of how these snakes keep just living forever, which they don't, but that would have been the perception from their shed skin. Okay, wow, this took longer than I thought. Okay, part 2 coming up. Snakes part 3. Okay, so there's this weird story in Numbers 21 where the Israelites are complaining about being released from Egypt into the desert and how there's no good food. And so God is frustrated that they're complaining, and so he sends a bunch of snakes to bite them. And they're all poisoned, and so Moses makes a bronze snake and puts it up on a pole. And anyone who looks at the pole is going to be healed of their snake bites. And so this passage has confounded Christians all over the place. We just don't understand it, because why a snake after what happened in Genesis? Doesn't Moses know that snakes are bad, and isn't this idolatry? And there's a few things happening here. One is that we think now that Genesis was probably not written at this point. Genesis was actually probably compiled during the exile. That's what Dr. Michael Heiser says. The other thing happening here is that this is an example of what's called sympathetic magic. So next video I'll explain what sympathetic magic is and how it relates to Jesus. Okay, snakes part 4. Now, the bronze snake on a pole was not idolatry because God had told Moses to build it, but it did eventually become a form of idolatry because it was such a highly regarded religious symbol. The Israelites eventually started to worship it and called it the name Nehushtan. King Hezekiah destroyed it as a false god when he discovered the law in the Book of Kings. So the other thing that's happening here, though, is what I was calling in the last video sympathetic magic. Sympathetic magic is where you take the thing afflicting you and use it to cure you, or some variation on that. So in this case, the snakes were biting the Israelites. Moses makes a snake. They look at the snake. They're cured. Snake cures snake. We also see this in the story of Jacob when he's carving out wood in stripes and spots to make his goats striped in spots. We also see this in the form of Jesus in the crucifixion, where the cross, Jesus defeats death through death. So in the next video, I'm going to talk about how Jesus and this snake are actually very closely related. Okay, Snakes in the Bible part 5. So in the last video we talked about sympathetic magic and how Moses lifting up the bronze snakes in the wilderness so that people could be healed of their snake bites is an example of sympathetic magic, and how Jesus on the cross is another example, probably the ultimate example of sympathetic magic in the Bible. The thing is, Jesus actually draws a direct correlation to himself and Nehushtan, the snake in the desert, in the book of John. When he's talking to Nicodemus, he says, "Just as Moses lifted up the snake in the wilderness, so the Son of Man must also be lifted up, so that everyone who believes can be saved." So in the same way that the Israelites would look at the snake in the wilderness, Jesus is saying everyone who looks to the cross can have and find salvation from their sin. And just as serpent imagery in the ancient Near East represents new life because of the shedding of the skin, Jesus represents eternal life because of the shedding of the grave. Snakes part 6, because I messed up a little bit. I apologize. It's been a long time since I've actually studied this. This is all kind of just information floating in my brain zeitgeist. So in the Genesis story, it does not call the serpent a Seraph. It calls it a Nakash. And a Nakash is a snake. It's another word for snake. Seraph also does mean snake or serpent-like creature. And then in the Numbers 21 story, it calls them Hanakashim Hasaraphim, which means essentially like the fire snakes. There is some people who think this might be a spiritual snake as it is sent by God, but in most Bibles it will be translated as venomous snakes because venom kind of burns. You can still come to the conclusion from the nature of the story that the serpent in the garden is an angelic creature just because a snake is a Seraph, and even though they call this one a Nakash. The Jesus Nahash 10 parallel, though, is still spot on, so that one I did right. So a lot of you have asked for a series on Satan, and I'm going to get into that very shortly. I'm just finishing up my notes on it. But my Snake Angels video continues to go quasi-viral. Viral for me, it's got like 67 or 70,000 views or something. And I say in the video that the word seraph means snake. And the biggest comment I get on the video is that seraph does not mean snake, and that Nakash means snake, and that Seraphim does not mean the snakes, it means the burning ones. And so I would like to show you something, in all humility, on my part. Seraph, sin resh pei, noun, a serpent. So yes, seraph, when used as a verb, can mean to burn, but nowhere in the Bible does it refer to seraphim as the burning ones. Seraphim is used 3 times in the book of Isaiah to describe snake-like angels, and everywhere else in the Bible it's either used to describe a snake or it's used as snake. Snake angels! One more thing on the snake angels. This is the Brown Driver Briggs Hebrew lexicon. That's what I was using to do the last video. And I want to show you one more entry. Seraphim, from the root word seraph, beings originally mythically conceived with serpents' bodies. Personification of lightning, and lots of other fun stuff. Just because something challenges the modern understanding or the evangelical understanding of the interpretation of the Bible does not mean that's not how it was originally perceived or understood. And it's very important to try and read the Bible with the understanding of the nuances that the original readers would have understood it with. Snake angels! I can't believe we're still on snake angels, but I love it. But no, I'm getting all of this from the Hebrew scriptures, the Hebrew Bible, and bolstering that with history? I did this in a video already, but I'll do it again. Here we go. This is Brown Driver Briggs, Seraphim, as beings originally mythically conceived with serpents' bodies. And Tim Mackey, who's a PhD, has talked about this. Dr. Michael Heiser has talked about this. Jewish theologian Benjamin Sommer has talked about this. There have been archaeological finds of tablets and seals depicting Isaiah that show the angels as having serpents' bodies. This isn't some weird fringe wordplay I'm pulling out of my ass. We're talking about potentially mythical creatures who go beyond the human understanding of physical form. It's possible they showed up as snakes to some people and humans with 6 wings to others. The only reason people say burning ones is because of a misinterpretation of Psalm 104:4. I have enjoyed this discourse.